Yeah, great. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a great pleasure to have you here at the Institute of International European Affairs. Apologies for the slight late start. My name is Barry Colfer, and I'm the Director of Research here. Welcome to this discussion on Beyond Belt and Road, Europe's Global Gateway Strategy. It's the first chance we have to do something like this since the onset of the current range of conflict and carnage and hardship in the Middle East, alongside Venezuela and Ukraine and Sudan and the rest of the world. So it makes these sorts of conversations, I think, regarding the role of the EU and regarding the role of Ireland within the EU, all the more urgent and all the more important. And I think we have a really great panel today. We'll hear from Barry Andrews, MEP for Dublin, Chair of the Parliamentary Development Committee and formerly of this parish. Welcome back, Barry. We'll hear from Jane Ann McKenna, the CEO of Dóchas, the umbrella NGO for development and humanitarian organizations. We have Anne Lanigan. Thank you so much, Anne, for hightailing it all the way from Carlow here, I believe, just making it in time. So thanks a lot. Anne is at Enterprise Ireland and is the local enterprise and regions lead. Then we'll hear from Ruth Parkin, who's the director of the EU Unit Development Cooperation and Africa Division at the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. So we're really spoilt. The Global Gateway Strategy has been described as the external elements of the EU's competitiveness agenda, or the competitiveness mission. And it's clearly critical to what the EU does. It's going to be feature in the competitiveness agenda, will feature prominently in Ireland's presidency priorities for the forthcoming presidency. And it's just one of the mainstays of European policy and debate at the moment. And I had a great treat for someone like me on Monday and Tuesday. I was at a conference in Brussels where all the different think tanks and experts in EU policy came together for a jamboree. And I attended a discussion on the Global Gateway, which is the subject of our discussion today. And I noted down two remarks, each from, I can describe them as EU insiders, one a public representative and one a civil servant. And with respect to the Global Gateway, one said, the Global Gateway is one of, the most consequential bits of EU policy that can protect Europe and Europeans in a moment of profound uncertainty. So there's that perspective. But another one said, with respect to the Global Gateway, we're following a neo-colonial pathway without the brutality of 19th century colonization. So this is not uncontested, it is not uncontentious, and as I said, it's important. And as is our mission, our role at the Institute, we just hope to add a bit of visibility and a bit of focus on this really important debate. So my colleagues will remind me if I don't do it myself, and I sometimes forget. This discussion is on the record. There will be a Q&A after the presentation. For those joining online, and very warm welcome to those who are joining us that way. You can participate by putting questions or comments through the Q&A function on Zoom. Those of you who are here in full Technicolor in Dublin, please just signal and a mic will be brought to you. And it's just to acknowledge that I know a portion of the room. There's a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge, and a lot of important perspectives that are sitting this side of the panel as well. So I do hope you'll be able to participate. So we're going to go in the order I mentioned, and I'm not going to introduce you, just if we can go from Barry after Barry, we'll hear from Jane Ann, then from Jane Ann to Anne, and then from Anne to Ruth, so I can sit back and enjoy. So over to you, please, Barry. Oh, there, Barry.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's brilliant to be back at the IIEA. I was Director General here for 2 years. Great to see familiar faces. I was elected to the European Parliament immediately after being here for a couple of years, but I made the mistake of only getting the 4th seat in the Dublin constituency, which meant that I had to go in what was called the deep freeze and wait till the British actually left the European Parliament 8 months later. So I often say that I was the only Irish person that benefited from Brexit. So I try to keep that quiet for most of the time. But it was the honor, a great honor for me to be elected as chair of the Development Committee, because I had a background in development. I was CEO of Goal for 4 years. And I had been on the European Affairs Committee in the Oireachtas, where I was involved with Brendan Howlin. We did a lot of development policy advocacy. And I think, you know, to take over as chair of a committee that you feel so passionate about is an incredible honor. So now Global Gateway, as Barry has just mentioned, is a key part of the European Union's competitiveness agenda. You're all familiar with the Draghi reports. We'll just mention that a little bit later on. But it doesn't have much prominence, Global Gateway. People don't know what it is. Even in Brussels, people don't know what it is. I'm sure all of you know what Belt and Road is, or you have an idea of what the Belt and Road Initiative is about China. But why 5 years later does nobody know what Global Gateway actually is in Ireland and elsewhere? And I think there are a number of reasons for that. I think particularly in Ireland, it's important to remember that the Global Gateway is based on using development finance institutions. These are kind of public development banks in European member states. And it's also based on, more recently, using export credit agencies. And Ireland neither has a DFI nor an export credit agency, although IBEC are campaigning to bring an export credit insurance scheme back into Ireland. But we don't have those key building blocks that are central to Global Gateway. Also, there's a big change happening in ODA. The Commission presented Global Gateway as a fundamental change in the paradigm around ODA, whereas Ireland is a big supporter of official development assistance, together with a number of other EU governments. So maybe we haven't really focused on it. And as I mentioned downstairs, I looked up the Oireachtas website to see when Global Gateway was mentioned in the Dáil or any of its committees last year, 2025. It was only mentioned once, and that was by Jane Ann McKenna, who's on the panel here, in a debate in the Foreign Affairs Committee. So it indicates there's no discussion papers, there are no seminars, and it's not really coming up politically. And yet, it is a really key part of the European Union's external policy and really important for the future of EU development policy. So let me just first of all describe the context. Now, everybody in this room will be familiar with these issues that have been central to the way the European Union has developed its own economic foreign policy. There is, of course, the Draghi report, which outlines the importance of European competitiveness. We have seen the budget contractions which are happening across the European Union member states, especially the big ones, Germany, France, Sweden, Belgium, and of course USAID was shuttered almost exactly a year ago. And this has had forced a major rethink in how NGOs and UN agencies operate. When the Global Gateway was conceived, first in December 2021, it was in the context of massive supply chain disruptions post-COVID. Now that has been supercharged in recent years because of various things that are happening, which again, I'm sure you hardly need to be reminded about, whether it is the war in Ukraine, whether it is the COVID disruptions we mentioned as well, but also the tariff turbulence that we've experienced, the return of conflict in the Middle East. It's had a major impact. And so Global Gateway is a way to try to address these shortcomings and try to diversify our supply chains, try to create agreements around critical raw materials and access to them, and digital connectivity across the world. And in a way, I think the best way to describe it, I think Barry mentioned it, is the external element of Europe's industrial policy. Now, that means it's going to be very problematic for those of us who are passionate about development, because the key element of it as well is it's using ODA money to try to achieve these objectives, to try to address geopolitical tensions, to try to be less naive in the world today. Now, the Egmont Institute prepared a paper for the Global Gateway Forum just before Christmas, and the Egmont Institute made the point that the European Union is very much attached to a world of rules, a world where there is order, where we rely on multilateralism, and all of that seems very contingent now. And so we are in a position where we have to be less naive, and we have to work towards making sure that we can protect Europe's crucial interests. So what exactly is the Global Gateway? At its center is an effort to boost infrastructure and investment across the world. It tries to reconcile, on the one hand, aligning with the Sustainable Development Goals, while also pursuing Europe's self-interest. Now, these are two elements that are very difficult to reconcile. There are many who believe that it's impossible, that they pull in different directions. So what we are hoping to see is that there will be a recognition that this is something we can reconcile in due course, but those tensions are very much there. The Team Europe approach is about bringing together the European financial institutions, whether it's the EIB or the development finance institutions of the member states or the export credit agencies, in order to leverage private sector investment. It was initially presented as a rival to the Chinese Belt and Road in December 2021. But as we'll see when I go through some of the examples of how it works across the world, it is very, very difficult to match the rhetoric with the challenges of disentangling complex supply chains. So we also can see that it is based in 5 different areas. So I'll simply highlight some of these now. And in particular, I think the best way to illustrate this is by making reference to one of these examples. So in the center of the slide, you'll see a reference to what's called the Lobito corridor. And this has involved 2 billion euro of European investment alongside 5 billion euro of US investment. And the Lobito port is on the coast of the Atlantic there in Angola, and it is designed to bring critical raw materials, in particular copper, from the copper belt in Zambia and DRC. And I had the pleasure to visit there just last October. And it was quite an eye-opener to see, in fact, what's happening on the ground. So 2 weeks ago, one of the European companies that operates the railway between DRC and the port in Angola announced that it had the first sale of low-carbon copper anodes to come out of one of the mines in DRC, and it's going to be transferred on the Lobito Atlantic Railway in just 7 days, where it was previously 45 days. And it would be sold on then, those copper anodes, to a European company. So this illustrates a couple of things that are, you could say, criticisms or perhaps obstacles to the success of the Global Gateway. First of all, the railway is operated by a consortium, including a Swiss company, a Belgian company, and a Portuguese company. 80% of the mines in the area are Chinese owned, including one of the mines that these copper anodes came from. The railway itself was built by the Chinese and handed over to the Angolans in around 2019. And you have also 40% Chinese ownership of the mine that this copper came from, 40% ownership by the Canadians, a Canadian company, and 20% ownership by the DRC. So it illustrates a number of things. First of all, that it is an extraction of critical raw materials without any value added in the country itself. And that is one of the big criticisms of Global Gateway. It is repeating the model of extraction, which really discredited Europeans in Africa and continues to be a mark against Europe in Africa. Secondly, I've mentioned a lot of countries that are involved in the supply chain, from China, Canada, America, Europe, and it also underlines how difficult it is to unravel and disentangle complex supply chains, which doesn't match the rhetoric around Global Gateway, which claims to be a rival to China that's going to diversify our supply chains and ensure that we can deliver the Green Deal and the digital transformation in Europe. And finally, when this was announced, these first sale just 3 weeks ago, the CEO of Trafigura did a press release, and I extracted this paragraph from the press release on the 19th of February. We are equally proud that these anodes will be transported via the Lobito Atlantic Railway, a milestone made possible by the vision support of the governments of DRC and Angola, as well as the loan package provided by the US International Development Finance Corporation and the Development Bank of Southern Africa. So you can see the problem there is Europe doesn't even get a mention, even though we have spent so much. So, and one of the things some of you will be familiar with is that, in fact, Europe writ large invests more in Africa than China does. It has a trade deficit with Africa, and so the trade terms are more favorable to Africa than China. China has a massive trade surplus. And yet we are invisible. So even though Global Gateway has helped to bring about this situation, there is a major issue around the visibility of Europe in some of these projects. So I just want to go back, if I can, just to mention over in the top right-hand corner is the Clean Trade and Investment Partnership. That's Cyril Ramaphosa, the president of South Africa, and President von der Leyen. And this is a type of a trade agreement, but it's not like Mercosur or the India trade agreement, because it doesn't require the ratification of the European Parliament. So it's not complicated, and it won't take 20 years to deliver. It's just the Commission doing a bilateral trade agreement at a different level. And it involves a huge amount of Global Gateway investment in delivering that. So again, you're using what is official development assistance to achieve trade objectives. And that's part of the tension about Global Gateway. But it's very important for access to critical raw materials. It's very important to helping the decarbonization of energy in South Africa. So the sources of financing, just to be very quick about this, because I'm conscious of time, is that the overall idea was to deliver 300 billion euro of investment. And the Commission said that they passed that in 2025 and have now set a target of 400 billion euro of investment by the end of 2027. The way it's financed is through grants from the European Commission, from the EU, from concessional loans from the EIB and DFIs, and guarantees from the likes of the European Fund for Sustainable Development. And these are all there to de-risk private sector investments in difficult to reach markets and to try to ensure that there are these investments in infrastructure. Private sector participation is key, but it has been really cautious, as we'll see. And these DFIs and export credit agencies are crucial to the way this happens. Now, this is a very complicated slide, but as you can see in the darker square, that's the 39 billion that comes from the European Fund for Sustainable Development, and that leverages the 135 billion euro in public and private investments. And the rest of it is made up by other financial institutions that are involved in achieving those targets. But I have to say, I have not been able to get to the bottom of how this is all working and what the figures and what the breakdown is on Lobito, for example, how much of that is coming from the EFSD Plus, how much of it is coming from private sector investment. It is very difficult. There's a complete lack of transparency. Now, this brings in the governance of Global Gateway. There is a board, as you can see in the second panel there. The Global Gateway board met for the first time in 2022, and it met for the second time in October 2025. So it was 3 years between the meetings. And I went along representing the Development Committee, David McAllister representing the AFET Committee, and Bernd Lange representing the Trade Committee. And Ursula von der Leyen was not there. Kaja Kallas was not there. Joseph Sikela was there for a very short time and left. So it wasn't taken seriously. And the minutes of the previous meeting 3 years earlier were exactly the same as the subject matter of the meeting just a few weeks ago. So some major changes have now occurred. Global Gateway Board will meet again in May. So it's going to be meeting much more regularly. And Joseph Sikela, as head of DG INTPA, the International Partnerships, will be running the board. Team Europe means all of the member states and all of the DFIs, and Ruth can talk to that. It's a very important part of the overall governance. The Business Advisory Group is where Anne Lanigan plays a role, and also the Civil Society Platform, which again, Jane Ann can talk about to some extent, but it's really important that these are represented. So for the future, if you are a private business and you think you have an idea where it's possible that EIB could de-risk your investment in the developing world, the Global Gateway Investment Hub is the way to go. The DG INPA promised that within 1 month, they will reply to proposals that they have received from private sector, and they will be able to get the assistance of their national governments in that respect. This is the debate for the next MFF.
The multi-annual financial framework is the 7-year budget of the European Union. It's been drastically simplified and reduced to just 4 headings, and we're debating all of that right now. In the first heading is where you will find the Common Agricultural Policy and cohesion funding. In the second heading, it's now called the European Competitiveness Fund. That's where you'll find Erasmus and Horizon and various other major programs in heading 2. In heading 3, that's where Global Gateway is. It's in the Global Europe Instrument. So the Global Europe Instrument will fund Global Gateway. And the key thing for us in the Parliament to try and focus on it in this regard is that 90% of the Global Europe Instrument must fulfill the criteria of ODA as set out by OECD DAC. Now, that's a real problem because, as we've seen, some of the investments don't look to me anything like the type of things that would qualify as overseas official development assistance. So that's the debate that we're having at the moment. So that is it. I just want to say by conclusion that we are having a very tough debate about this issue. The Parliament is divided slightly. There are those who think that we should only be focusing on European business interests, and we should be very, very unapologetic about that. I think we can reconcile that with the need to provide and support official development assistance. That's the way we're going to try and push it. I think we have to, however, have a debate about introducing what I'm calling soft power EU. So we have hard power. We're all investing now in defense and security, and that's important and has to be done. But we have these incredible assets across the world, a great credibility, great tradition, and it's how we distinguish ourselves to a great extent from other powers is our soft power and our influence through the likes of development policy and our diplomacy. And I think it's something that we need to develop. And those are the 2 elements that I believe will make Global Gateway a success. Thank you.
Thanks a million, Barry. So you can stay there or there. What I was going to say to the 3 of you is thank you so much, Barry. You're very welcome to either speak from where you're sitting or from the podium. It's as you wish, Jane Ann. Up you get.
Okay, yeah.
You've absolutely just mind your...
Thank you.
Just to say, we're just in keeping with Barry's excellent presentation. Thanks a million. We have each of those 3 pillars represented between NGOs, business, and the state. So I think a perfect preface to the discussion. And thanks a million, Barry.
Yes, thanks very much, Barry. And I think there's a few points that you made that I'll touch on a little bit in my remarks as well. So I suppose from a civil society perspective, we really see the Global Gateway is a moment of opportunity, but also a moment of immense risk as well. So as Barry alluded to, I think as it is at the moment, it lacks clear criteria, transparency, and there's a lack of, I suppose, information sharing around funding flows, project pipelines, monitoring, and that all kind of undermines the overall accountability of the Global Gateway. I suppose this creates a perfect environment, particularly in the current global context, for politically dominant interests to override long-term development interests. And I think we need to seriously consider how aligning strategic interests with development cooperation can be done both transparently and also responsibly. I suppose the first step is to acknowledge that Global Gateway is not the best tool to provide for human development, nor reach the furthest behind in line with Agenda 2030. I think we've been clear, and I think also the Development Committee have also stated that while Global Gateway is an important component of EU international cooperation, it cannot be the only one. And a dedicated strategy is needed to address human development, just as it is needed to address the needs of both conflict and fragile affected states. So investing in human development, sectors such as health, education, social protection, has been proven to reduce inequalities. And Global Gateway projects that do not have a strong and explicit objective of tackling inequalities may end up doing the exact opposite, widening inequalities and creating new divides or deepening existing ones. I suppose it'll only succeed really if there are partner countries and communities are genuinely involved in shaping priorities, not just simply receiving projects aligned with European strategic interests. And that actually means meaningful consultation, transparency in project selection, and real space for local and civil society engagement. I suppose the European Commission now needs to kind of move forward with a bit more of a systematic approach to engaging all the key actors. I think there is an opportunity for the human development to be promoted through this 360-degree approach. I suppose this is essentially what sets Global Gateway apart from the Belt and Road Initiative. It's an attempt to deliver a model that can be high standards, good governance, and transparency. And there's a number of different elements to the 360. I won't go into, but it stretches from, standards around ESG, skills, education, gender equality, involvement of civil society. And they're all enabling factors that really should mitigate some of the risks and of these kind of infrastructure-focused investments. At the moment, that all sounds good, adopt a 360 approach and, we're on our way, but the reality is very different. I think if we look at some recent research, that there's only approximately 8 interventions of 143 blended operations that are explicitly designed or presented by the Commission as 360-degree projects. So even if that number has changed, slightly over the last few months, the reality is it only applies to a very small fraction of EU investments. And I think we've all seen, we don't have to look too far back in history, how large infrastructure projects can increase debt, damage the environment, worsen inequality if they're not carefully designed. And I suppose you cannot create lasting economic value without human development. And that's why there's such a need for clear targets, safeguards, transparent and ring-fenced envelopes for development outcomes as part of Global Gateway. I think despite what is being said by the Commission, I think civil society's role within Global Gateway is extremely limited. I liked Barry's graph there, where there is the civil society and local authorities platform. In reality, it has absolutely no weight. It is not embedded in any of the governance structures within the Global Gateway. It has no meaningful way to actually engage with the other governance structures, such as the business platform. So there are real gaps there in terms of actually what do we mean by actually involving civil society and local authorities. I think, there is a way that the EU needs to look at civil society now. It's, the reality is, you cannot deliver sustainable change within societies, sustainable development, or indeed large-scale infrastructure that's embedded in the communities without engaging with local civil society, national civil society, or indeed using the expertise and the experience of that civil society groups and NGOs as well. Otherwise, you're setting yourself up for failure. I think there are other recommendations that we would have, particularly around strengthening the EU's delegation to engage with civil society. So actually not just, have it as a nice idea, but really how are we embedding it in all of the different processes, both at the EU delegations level, but also how are we creating clear indicators on gender, on inequality, on human rights, on all of that within the different programs that are being there. And how indeed our Global Gateway flagship resources including space and envelopes for civil society within that. Just a word, I think, on the kind of team national approach, and I'm curious to hear from Ruth on that as well. But I think that there is, if you look at the concept note, particularly from the Global Gateway Investment Hub, the team national approach does not include civil society. It includes, the investment banks. It includes, government. It also, we don't have obviously a development agency here in Ireland, so that, eliminates that possibility. But I think then there is an opportunity for Ireland to look and do things a bit differently when it comes to Team National and see how we want to embed civil society in some of those initiatives as well. So I suppose, I think that if Global Gateway is to be credible as a development strategy, which it is poised or positioned to be, it must not be necessarily judged by how much it builds, but on who it benefits. And I think that's what we need to keep central to a lot of the discussion on the Global Gateway today. So thanks.
Thanks a million, Anne. And do you want to stay where you are or go to the bottom? Super.
Yeah, thanks, Barry. So Anne Lanigan is my name, and I'm with Enterprise Ireland. For those of you in the room who don't know, I'm sure you all know, Enterprise Ireland is a government agency responsible for the development of Irish-owned enterprise. So I sit on the senior management team of Enterprise Ireland, and my role is heading up the division responsible for local enterprise and regions, which, if I'm to be honest, doesn't have anything to do with the Global Gateway. So just to explain to you why I have a connection, I spent 5 years from 2018 to 2023 based in Europe, in Amsterdam, running our European offices. And during that period of time, I got involved with an organisation called Trade Promotion Europe. Trade Promotion Europe is an organisation of organisations like Enterprise Ireland, so Business France, Germany Trade and Invest, ESEX in Spain, etc., all the big European trade promotion organisations. And their mission, I was president of that for 2 years. I'm now on the board of that organisation still. And our mission is to bring the voice of trade promotion and the companies that we represent to the Commission directly. And so in the course of my work there, Global Gateway emerged. And the Commission were very keen that business would be involved. So they established the Business Advisory Group, and we applied to be part of that small group. There's 50 or 60 people on it. So I actually sit on that Business Advisory Group. So I have direct engagement, particularly with DG IMPA in terms of Global Gateway. So maybe just a few thoughts around it. And I am unashamedly on the business side of things, sorry. So I speak from the perspective of business and where Global Gateway is relevant or not for business. So the concept, certainly among business across Europe, is very welcome. And there is no doubt that there are opportunities in the different regions where Global Gateway wants or is operating. I would say for Ireland that the region that is of most relevance and shows the most opportunity is probably Africa. I think that Ireland has a strong reputation in Africa. And that's actually thanks to our history there. We weren't colonizers. We were missionaries, and in fact, that reputation is perhaps fading a little bit because we don't have as many missionaries. But if you talk to older people in Africa, almost all of them will have had an Irish teacher or Irish nuns or an Irish doctor or whatever. So there is a reputation there, and I've always felt that we should be doing more in Africa. However, there are many challenges, and I recognise what you're talking about, Jane. And it seems to me a little bit like Global Gateway is like an aeroplane that they're trying to build as they're flying it. But I would say in the last number of years, it has improved quite significantly, and we are making progress. And certainly, I feel DG IMPA in particular has been listening to business. But there are challenges, and one of the things that DG IMPA are particularly interested in is to have SMEs involved. And I actually think it's extremely difficult for SMEs to be involved in Global Gateway. The projects are very, very big. Barry talked about the investment hub. Minimum size project for the investment hub is 10 million. So for a lot of European SMEs, and particularly for Irish SMEs, which are all on the S side of SMEs, it really is not very feasible unless there is realistic funding there. And that's something that Trade Promotion Europe are really struggling with to understand. Where are they going to find the funding? We have a working group within Trade Promotion Europe specifically for Global Gateway, which I have been chairing. And so I'm hearing the views. I'm not just giving the views of Irish business. These are the views from across Europe. There's also an awful lot of bureaucracy or eurocracy. And I have to say, for me, because I'm a very straight talker, I do find that extremely difficult. But that's the way Europe works. And I think we just have to be able to manage it. And I'm sure you're much better at that kind of thing than I am. But we also have to recognise for Ireland, if I speak specifically about Ireland, we have some really strong Irish multinationals. So there is opportunity for some of our bigger companies. However, for our SMEs, certainly in Enterprise Ireland, we have tried to focus them on particular geographies so they don't spread themselves too thinly. So the regions where we're encouraging our businesses to export to are the UK, the US, and Europe. So they're not the emerging economies, they're the developed economies. And actually, that's where Irish product and services sell best. So there would be a shift if we had to try and look at emerging economies. And that is a real challenge for our smaller businesses. What I have understood from talking to DG IMPA, they never talk about development assistance with us. They sell it entirely as business opportunities. So again, I think that there is, a mismatch between what exactly Global Gateway is. The business community are looking at it, can we make money here? Let's be realistic. That's what they're there for, to make a profit. Whereas there are lots of other competing objectives, which I think haven't really been brought together. And I do believe they can be brought together. There's no reason why they can't, but I don't think that work has really gone into it yet. Barry talked a little bit about Team Europe and Team Nationals. And I would just say that looking at the other European countries, those countries that have really started to get their act together around Team Nationals would be Germany, Belgium, Portugal, Spain, and France. And it's interesting to consider those because, let's face it, they were all colonizers. So they have an advantage. You know, so when you look at Spain, for example, they're looking at the countries that they previously colonized because they have, whether it's a good or a bad reputation, they have relationships there. The French are the same. They're going to the French-speaking parts of Africa. So Ireland is a little bit kind of outside of that. However, we have the advantage that we weren't colonizers, so we sort of have a positive reputation from that point of view. But I might leave my comments at that for now. I'd be very welcome to answer questions later on. But that's the view, I guess, from the business side of things.
Are the Dutch at the table?
Yes, they are. They are. And they did actually, yeah. And the Commission really wants to be involved in all of these launches of Team National. So yes, they have just launched theirs.
I ask you that because you listed off who's who.
Yeah, but I would have said the others are probably a bit more advanced in terms of involvement in projects, in flagship projects, as well as getting their Team National together. Yeah.
Thank you, Anne. Thanks. And indeed, it's the straight talking nature of your remarks why we always invite you back, Anne. So thanks a million. Last but not least, please, Ruth.
Thanks very much, Barry. I'll do my best to come at the end, especially when so much has already been said and explained, and then there's a bit of the few pointers as to things that I might be able to elucidate, and I might not be able to elucidate. So we'll see. My name is Ruth Parkin, and I'm the director, as Barry said, of our unit within the Development Cooperation and Africa Division that looks at EU policy, so EU development policy, engaging also now on presidency issues, and I also do Ukraine funding. I think maybe just from the outset, it's interesting not from my perspective, but as a comment in responding to the remarks that have come in advance, that not every member state manages the Global Gateway from within its development division or even within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So I am speaking as an official coming from a development perspective within our Ministry of Foreign Affairs. But if I was coming from one of my partner countries in another member state, I might be coming from a trade ministry or from a business and enterprise perspective. And that is a part of the way in which Global Gateway works. From our perspective within DCAD, we certainly see this as a strategy that could play an important role in generating inclusive economic growth. That has been one of our main objectives and remains an objective of ours. Minister Richmond is very keen in his interactions and his external his remarks to underline that Ireland is committed to development assistance, that we are increasing our development assistance. This year it has reached, from Irish Aid's perspective, 866 million, is at its highest level, and the commitment that is in a Better World policy remains. So our commitments to reach the furthest point first and to look at our core areas of policy remain steady. And we engage with everything we do from that perspective. So we are looking to see our development money do that work. But within, and we will do that, through this year when we hold the presidency, those questions around humanitarian need, gender equality, climate action, governance, those will be at the heart of the policy that we pursue. We're also working within an environment now where the future of development cooperation is in discussion. This is evident in processes that are underway, in discussions that are happening at political level, and I would say in the emergence of new ways of doing things, including at European level. So we do see the Global Gateway as a way that we are going to be working into the future, but that it also has to work to the objectives that member states have for the external action of the EU. And part of that work is working with the private sector, leveraging what is private money and achieving outcomes outside the EU. It is part of the wider EU's reputation and relationship with countries. The Commission Director General that is leading on a lot of this INPA is the Director General for International Partnerships. It's not looking at the whole world, it's looking at maybe specific parts, but it is talking about mutually beneficial partnership. And for us, we focus in then on the mutually beneficial. And from our perspective, that means that human development is at the core of the work that needs to be done. It is, for us, human development that underpins a broader development within any country. And I think that's a part of our national story and something that our politicians and our government talk about a lot, is that Ireland, particularly as an EU member, but more broadly, has experienced development because we invested in education, because we invested in poverty reduction, because we invested in social protection, as well as in industrial development and investment. But one without the other doesn't necessarily enable everything to rise. And so that will remain at how we approach these matters. We have the perspective that we take the position that Global Gateway can and should be a part of complementing ODA, and that it can and should be engaged with communities that are furthest behind and in fragile and conflict-affected states and small island developing states. That doesn't mean it's going to be the easiest project or the top-level project, but we are fundamental that the 360-degree approach does need to work, that the question of how this impacts on the ground is important, and that it should be linked to human development outcomes. We also see that understanding and engaging with local actors, including civil society, locally and in Europe, local government and the private sector is essential. And so we do welcome the establishment of the Global Gateway Civil Society and Local Authorities Dialogue Platform. I understand your remarks, Jane-Ann. I think we as a would see that the important voice of civil society, it's always vital to find routes and platforms, and that is a part of the way in which we would see this moving too. We haven't, the 5 targeted areas for partnership: digital, climate, energy, transport, health, and education, and very much seen those top line, digital, climate, and energy as that, and transport, the big infrastructure, and then health and education research underpinning that. And so we see those health and education aspects also as very important. Where can we bring perhaps knowledge or information that Ireland has? Are there entry points for companies or for Ireland as a development actor, which are slightly different to other member states with different histories, different backgrounds? The investment hub, I think the Commission would be of the view that it needs time, but a time to bed down. It is a long-term project. It has been going for maybe 5 years now, Global Gateway as a strategy. The general feeling seems to be it's beginning to come together. It's time now to move it into the next stage. And it will take time. It's not a single year program. And we will have to stick with it and keep making our points, but also understanding how it can work for Irish business, as well as for the local communities and for the people of the countries in which the projects are implemented.
Thanks a million, Ruth. And it is difficult to go fourth in a line of 4, but I think that was brilliant. So much to feast on, everybody. And I'm going to come back to the panel in a moment, but just to remind you, we have the hall until 1:45. So anyone here, anyone online, just prepare your questions, come and see it. But I just want to give the panel an opportunity, especially Barry and Jane-Ann, but also you, Anne, if you'd like to come back on anything that the panel has said subsequent to you, starting with you, perhaps, Barry.
Yeah, well, it's very interesting to hear Anne's perspective, and I think we had a lunch earlier, and Maurice Sadler made the point that the development community and the private sector don't speak the same language, and there was a mutual tension for years. When I was in Goal, the private sector was a 4-letter word, and we had to move into a discipline called private sector engagement. where we put consortia together with capital, with technology, with local farmers, with our connectivity on the ground to create market systems from which we could then withdraw. And they were incredibly successful. They were rare, but they were incredibly successful. And what I'm kind of excited about, you know, I'm trying to be optimistic here, like Global Gateway, but the guy who's leading DG INPA, the commissioner, he's a former CEO of a bank. And so he understands, obviously, the concepts of investment and leverage and the multiplier effect. And he's using a development budget. It's a difficult tension, but he's using the right language to talk about reconciling these two things. It's a pity that they're not talking about that in the business advisory group. And it's a pity that the civil society people feel a little bit left out. And I feel a little bit left out as a parliamentarian. You know, we've one meeting in 3 years. So all of these bits have to come together. But I think Ruth is right. I think it's beginning to take much clearer shape. And I think it's been really accelerated by the really tragic events that are happening at the moment. Interruptions to supply chain are supercharged. Interruptions to trade are supercharged. Tariffs are on everybody's minds. And so the need for us to use some of this to develop this new economic foreign policy is crucial.
Excellent. Thank you, Barry. Jane, and I invite you if you haven't. Great.
Yeah, I think it's, you know, I think probably part of, I'll start negative and I'll go positive. I think part of the frustration, I think, of civil society is that ultimately it's our budget on the line here. You know, this is the development budget on the line that is being shifted into kind of economic interests. And, you know, we're not, I think it's, you know, the kind of trickle down economics effect, we don't really buy into it, to be honest. We say, you know, it's still the people who are furthest behind who'll suffer the most. And I think we're just saying that it's, so that's probably one of our biggest frustrations, because it's kind of taking a huge level of the budget at the same time as being sidelined within the whole process. I think there is a opportunity here a bit for Ireland. Like as Ruth said there, you know, it's clear where Ireland is in terms of development. You know, we have made, we are continuing to increase our budget. We come with a very principled approach, a very values-based approach. And I think we need to bring that into the global gateway conversations in Europe. We need to be asking why it is that, you know, and I think it's very interesting even to learn today, you know, from Anne that, you know, that aid and development is not being talked about in other platforms within the umbrella of global gateway. So I think we as Ireland is kind of holding kind of those values quite dear. I think there's an opportunity for us to kind of come in and try and bring that in and trying to see and ask the questions about why are we not, you know, within those governance structures, why is there not an opportunity for the civil society and local authorities platform to engage with the business platform? It's been something that's been requested by civil society, at least for the last number of years, but to no avail. So I think there is, you know, how can we make very practical inroads to try and bring some of these interests together? Because at the moment, it seems very separate. And I think that's probably what's come out of this discussion as well.
Thank you very much, Shannon. And before going to you, we'd like to...
Yeah, I might make a couple of points. One, which kind of ties into a little bit what you're saying there, Dana. I think there is an opportunity with Global Gateway to support the development of business with European values. And one of the big things that we had within the Business Advisory Group was the fact that a lot of the tenders for projects were not specifying that the applicants needed to be European businesses, right? And that to European business was very difficult to swallow, because this is European money, and yet you're going to give it to a Chinese company or an American company or even a British company, because they're not in the EU anymore either. And we made some progress on that. And one of the suggestions that we made was that in the request for tenders, that there would be some requirements and criteria put in that would reflect European values in business in terms of labour standards and things like that. And I think you've probably seen in the last few weeks, the Made in Europe piece is coming out, not just relevant to Global Gateway. So I think that there is an opportunity actually for us to be involved in supporting businesses in emerging economies where we are pushing the European values rather than allowing some of the not so good values that we see around the world to, and I won't mention any country in particular, but but I think Europe is known for its very strong values and in terms of society and people development, etc. And the other point I would make is, again, on an optimistic note, if Ireland is to be involved in Global Gateway from a business perspective, I think the best way we can do it is by collaborating with other countries. I think that's what's really important here. These are big projects. We can't do everything. We're really good on digital, for example. Can we, engage with other team nationals in order to be able to win business for our businesses in those areas? So there is definitely opportunity for collaboration in all kinds of different ways that will really take advantage of what is a very good concept, but probably needs a bit more development.
Thank you, Anne. Ruth, you left it on the pitch, right? Or do you want to say anything?
No, I'm fine.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, guys.